good, everybody? This is Eli Wells. Thank you for joining me on this video. Today, we're going to be talking about something called fear, which I know we're all very familiar with. I know I am. Fear is something that we all go through. Fear is something that I don't think is escapable, when it comes to living life, and especially when we're talking about some of the things that, I'm going through in the book called Let God Out. So in the book, I'm getting into a lot about listening to your spirit and basically looking to do something that you're passionate about, but may be new to you, maybe a new step in your life, and maybe something that you haven't ever really tried to do before. As an example, when I first walked away from corporate America, it was something that was new to me, right? It was something where I was used to having my income coming in from the job, and then it was like, okay, I got to transition to being able to make my own money. I got to have some money situated. I got to have ideally income already coming in before I make that move. But just anticipating it, just thinking about it, a lot of times our minds can start to really play tricks on us, right? Our imaginations can go wild. We start thinking of all sorts of things that could go wrong, may go wrong. What if this happens? What if that happens? None of it's really real, but in our own minds it is, and to our emotions it is, and to what we think is reality, because ultimately we all create our own reality. But to what we think is reality, when we're going through these fears and all these emotions, we're using that as a lot of times an excuse or reason to not do something, an excuse or reason to not pursue the things that we really want to do, not pursue our passion, not pursue our whole purpose of being on this planet, right? Because of fear. So I think it's kind of a big deal in the sense of knowing how to move past this, knowing how to manage it, knowing how to deal with this emotion, because that's really all we're dealing with, right? Where does the word emotion even come from? It comes from energy and motion, right? And so whenever we experience this emotion, this energy, there's a way that we can move it, we can transition. There's a way that we can position ourselves so that it's not something that stops us from doing what we really want to do. I read something in a book that I thought was a good way to, kind of start off this whole conversation that I thought was kind of good. And it's in this book that I found called Fear by Osho. And, he goes kind of deep on a lot of different things. And I found some good stuff inside this book about fear. But one thing that I found that was really, kind of entertaining to me was his Zen story that I'm going to read to you. I think it fits well what we're talking about. So it says that a man walking in the night slipped and fell from a rocky path, afraid he would fall down thousands of feet because he knew that just at the edge of the path there was a very deep valley. He grabbed hold of a branch that was overhanging the edge. In the darkness of night, all he could see below him was a bottomless abyss. He shouted, and his own shout was reflected back. There was nobody to hear him. You can imagine that man and his whole night of torture. Every moment there was death below. His hands were becoming old. He was losing his grip, but he managed to hold on, and as the sun came out, he looked down and laughed. There was no abyss. Just 6 inches below his feet, there was a rock ledge. He could have rested the whole night, slept well. The ledge was big enough, but instead, the whole night was a complete nightmare. I thought that was a good story. And the reason why it's a good story is because I think that's a great example of our fears most of the time. Meaning that we've imagined all these things that may and could and might be and that will happen to us if we make this decision or if we do X, Y, Z, right? So if we decide to pursue our passion, well then, what if I don't make any money and I fail and I can't pay my rent and I can't pay my bills, and if you got kids, what if I can't feed my kids? What if I can't do this? What if I can't do that, right? All these things that come into your head, these fears that aren't necessarily grounded in reality, they're just what we're making up, So this story highlights that because he was in fear of an illusion. The illusion was that there wasn't enough light to see that there was only 6 inches for him to go and there was ground beneath him, right? So, what are we talking about here? One of the things we're talking about is the fact that most of the time when we're fearing something, right, this fear has to do with the unknown. This fear has to do with darkness. This fear has to do with a place that we're unaware of, right? So when we're thinking of the dark, right, and the unknown darkness, and I know as a kid, I definitely had some issues with the closet and the dark. It wasn't something that I was just running into and happy about. It was something that I was a little weary of, especially after watching horror films and whatnot. I'd be scared of it like anybody else. But it was an illusion every time that I would think something's going on in the closet. It was an illusion every time I thought I saw something in the closet. It was just clothes a certain way, right? It was just a hat this way and a coat this way and that way, which may look like somebody was there. But really, nobody was there. It was all in my own head. And so this darkness, this unknown is ultimately inside of us, right? Because what's the real journey in this life? Now, a lot of people would say love, which I agree with. A lot of people would say that the real journey is just to enjoy your life. I agree with that too. But ultimately, we're here to do one thing, and that's to know thyself, right? The real journey here is to get to know ourselves. And so whenever we're thinking about something, whenever our spirit's calling us to do something and we feel this fear about it, we feel this, hesitancy and excuses start to come up when we want to do something else or, avoid it, it's because we're afraid of the darkness, but it's that darkness and that unknown inside of ourselves. It's the unknown aspect that we have to get to know ourselves. Now, what happens when you begin to look into that place, or when you begin to go into that place within yourself that is unknown? Well, then you begin to shine light in that darkness, and then you can see that aspect of yourself for what it is. The fullness of that aspect of yourself becomes in the light. There's no more fear. There's only a joy of doing whatever you're doing. There's only a, man, I'm glad I did this. I'm so glad I decided to move forward, even though I felt that way, because you shine light on that area within yourself so that you can move forward and do something which ultimately, allows for you to grow, right? And that's what we're talking about here, which is that when you do step into these fears, when you do decide to move past it, then these are opportunities where you grow and you begin to expand yourself and you begin to step into that passion. You begin to step into that purpose of why you're here in the first place. Okay? Now, I wrote down notes here because honestly couldn't remember everything on top of my head what I want to talk about. So, we're talking about the darkness. Okay, now, the other thing we have to talk about with fear is the fact that it's an energy, right? And so because fear is an energy, it can be created nor destroyed, right? That's the law of thermodynamics, right? Energy can be created nor destroyed. So therefore, if someone's talking about, I'm going to master all my fears, right? And fear won't ever exist in me again. I'm always going to be on top of it, or anything along those lines where someone says, I have no fear exists in me. I would say they're lying. Okay, because any situation can come up into your life where you have fear. And it doesn't have to be dealing with you directly. It could be something dealing with your family. It could be someone calling you and saying something about, a family member, a daughter, a mother, a father, who's all of a sudden ill, right? And could be facing death or something along those lines. Guess what? You're going to have some fear. If you love them, there's going to be some sort of fear there about what's going to happen with them. You're going to feel that. If you care about somebody, you're going to feel that emotion, right? And so there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is that if a person acts like it doesn't exist within them, they're lying to themselves. Okay, so it's all about how we deal with this energy. So when we're talking about how to deal with this energy that can't be created nor destroyed, right? Then what we're talking about is how to transform it. How do we transform this energy that comes up whenever we're trying to do something new, whenever we're trying to grow? How do we transform that energy? One of the ways to transform that energy, number one, is do not try to suppress it. Okay? Suppression of the energy will ultimately mean that it's going to come back up in a way that's much more drastic and what's the word I'm looking for? Drastic and violent, right? And not necessarily you're going to take a violent action, but in the way that it manifests in your emotional body. Okay? The shock of it will be much more if you try to suppress it. It's kind of like when you take a ball and you try and hold it underwater, right? The more you push it under, the more pressure that's applied to that ball when you try and push it underwater. I'm talking about a ball filled with air, right? When you push it underwater a lot, when you let that mug up, it's gonna pop up out the water with even more force, right? And so that's not what you want to do with your fears. That's not how you want to handle them. Ideally, what you want to do with your fear when it arises is acknowledge it, number one. Okay? So it's an energy, it's something that exists. Acknowledge that it's arising. You can feel it, you know what it is. Okay? Trying to ignore it won't work, and that's a lot of times what people do, right? So when you know you're supposed to do something, you just decide to ignore it and act like it doesn't exist, right? If you're afraid of something, you just kind of ignore it and act like it doesn't exist. You go on through life and do something else, right? I know I got a lot of distractors that I can use whenever I'm trying to avoid something. We all do. All sorts of distractors. Start watching some TV. Let me just go through Instagram for a second. Or just sit on IG for a minute. Facebook for a minute. All these different things that you can do. Go work out. Nothing wrong with working out, but sometimes you can use it as a distraction as well, or to ignore something. Okay. Okay. So the next thing you don't want to do is blame other people or create a reason outside of yourself why you're not doing whatever action that you're afraid of, right? Which is what happens a lot too. So the reason why I can't do this is because so and so did that, or because this and that, or because him or her, or whatever it might be. Blaming someone outside of yourself is not a way to deal with it either, right? And ignoring and I think avoidance is going to be the same things. We're trying to avoid is going to be the same thing. What you want to do, okay, is acknowledge it and then go ahead and move to that activity, right? In spite of those feelings, and try and use those feelings to empower you, knowing that it's not going to be anything as bad as what you thought it might be. Once you get into it, you're going to actually love doing it, especially involving anything with your passion or what you feel like you're supposed to be here to do. Okay, so move towards it, and then don't focus on fear. Instead of focusing on it, transmute that energy. You can transmute that energy by focusing on something like love, for instance. How much you love doing whatever it is that you really want to do. How much you love this activity. How much you're going to love the results of it. How much you're going to love the impact that it can make on other people, right? How much you're going to love the quality of life that you will get in return for creating this product or doing this service out there. Focus on that energy instead of the fear, and that's what's going to actually come to you is what you're focusing on. So the real trick, right, with it is your focus. The real trick is not focusing on the fear, but transmuting that energy to love, right? Transmuting that energy to something, to joy, right? Using those energies and focusing on those energies is a much, much more empowering way to deal with that energy force. And ultimately, it's going to allow for you to do those things that you really want to do. Because let's face it, if you don't do that, right, and if someone never goes after or confronts their fears, if they never move past their fears, then they end up living a completely dull life. Bottom line, right? Someone who never takes any risk, never puts himself out there in any way, always plays it safe, always does this little particular thing that they know they can do and they never move outside of that. They're very unexpanded, right? dull person. And if that offends you, hopefully to help you. But my point here is to say that by not trying anything, by not stepping out there, by not having some courage, by not moving past your fears, right? Then your life really you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? There's a saying I heard a long time ago, which I think fits this perfectly, which is a battleship is safest in harbor, but that's just not what it's built for. And we here on this earth, going through this life, as spiritual beings going through human experience, we're here to experience. We're here to grow. We're here to take some calculated risk because that is how we grow. We're here to shine light in our own darkness. We're here to shine light on ourselves in our own dark spots so we can see ourselves as we really are and grow from those experiences. That's why we're really here. We're here for that. Though that's our real purpose. And when that's not happening, then you're going to feel like you're missing out on something. Even though your ego mind will trick you into feeling like I'm safe and doing what I should be doing, deep down inside, there's something else. And that's what I'm talking about right now, tapping into that energy force, right? So now, what other tool can we use or should you be aware of when dealing with fear? Self-awareness. I'm talking about being self-conscious, right? When you're self-conscious, that means you're really worried about what people are going to say about you, and you're very, completely worried about other people's thoughts and feelings and emotions towards you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about self-awareness, being completely aware of self, being aware of what your emotions are doing, being aware of what your body is doing, being aware of what your spirit is talking to you about or telling you or influencing, being aware of that intuitive feeling that you get about doing this thing that you really love doing, right? That awareness will help you be able to navigate these emotions that everybody goes through, but help you be able to navigate them in a way that's healthy, in a way that's a creative endeavor, in a way that's an empowering way to move about your life. Okay, self-awareness ultimately is the key to getting to know thyself, because as you become more and more aware of yourself, and obviously that's not an easy task, and this isn't a destination, it's a journey. So this is something that we'll go through our whole lives. We'll continue to unfold, we'll continue to grow, we'll continue to do new things throughout our whole lives. That's never going to stop. The thing about it, though, is being able to see progress in yourself, being able to see that you grew from one point to this point. And when you look back over a couple of years, you say, man, I remember back then I was still afraid. I was still afraid to do this. I was still afraid to do that. If I look back 3 years ago, I was still afraid to write a book. I was still afraid to step out there and start talking to people and sharing my life experience and sharing the knowledge that I've been able to have. And it wasn't even a reality to me. So it was something that I had to grow into. And after doing it, I'm so glad I did, because now the feeling of, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing at this point in my life exists. I'm in the moment, I'm present. And when you're doing the things you're supposed to do, when you're tapping into that energy of why you're really here, you'll have that feeling of knowing you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, knowing you're on point with your purpose. And there's no feeling like that. There's nothing that can ever take that away from you, and there's nothing that can replace it either. Okay, which is why it's such a perfect point to be at. And it's ultimately about continually moving to experience that experience, because as this becomes, as you get over one hurdle in your life, or as you climb to a new level, then you have another one to go to. And there's always areas to grow. It's a non-stop thing, yet knowing that you're doing what you're supposed to and constantly having that self-awareness, being willing to look at yourself and know what you need to do here and where. And ultimately, when you're doing what you're supposed to do, you always know exactly what to do. And when the answer is not there, you can just wait for it, and it always comes without question. Now, the last thing that I think is necessary in this short little segment. Of course, we can go into a much deeper dive, um, in a more extensive training. But in this segment, the last thing that I really want to talk to you about is trusting yourself, right? Not just trusting yourself, but also learning to trust others. Because when you trust you first, in order to trust somebody else, number one, you gotta trust yourself. And if you're constantly lying to yourself about what's real, what you're afraid of, right? If you're avoiding things, if you're avoiding those fears, if you're blaming others for those fears, if you're not stepping into being the true you and shining light on your own darkness, right? So you can be aware of who you really are and what you're really capable of, then you are going to blame others and you're not going to ultimately have that trust in yourself. Okay? And so when you begin to step into those fears and move past those fears and start trusting yourself, then that trust will also be reflected in how you trust other people around you, how you trust your family, how you trust your friends, right? And you'll have a trusting environment. It's like if there's somebody around you that you don't need to trust, they're not going to be around long because you'll automatically know how to deal with them accordingly. But normally, you're always going to have way more people around you that you can trust than not because you trust yourself. And if something's not right, your spirit will let you know it's not right. If you're not supposed to be involved with someone or something or doing something or something, you'll have that feeling within yourself. You'll have that knowing within yourself that you're not supposed to be doing that. And so by learning how to trust and move in that state of being, trusting yourself, knowing that you're on purpose, knowing that you're living out your passion the way that you know you should be, then everything else around you will begin to unfold as well. Everything else around you will begin to turn into an example of abundance and how we can live in abundance whenever we want. I like to put it how we can ball out in abundance, right? That ability is within you once you begin to live and move through those fears and move through anything that you feel might be holding you back by focusing on love, by focusing on joy, and trusting yourself and having that self-awareness. I hope that what we talked about here, I know it was a rather short little session, but I hope that what we talked about here was able to help you in some way. I definitely go into these subjects in further detail on my book, in my book called Let God Out, which you can get at my site, eliawells.com. And I definitely look forward to talking to you on the next video. We're going to talk about how to tap into and how to discover your passion. I hope this training was informational for you. I hope some part of it touched you. Whatever resonated with you, keep it. Whatever didn't, throw it away or turn it back on and watch it again. Maybe something to catch you next time. I definitely do have an audio training that is coming. That's going to go more in depth in some of the subject matter that we just discussed here concerning moving past your fear. And once again, I appreciate you taking out the time to join me on this video. I look forward to seeing you again on the inside.